Karoline Leavitt was forced to play the piano to mock her, but her talent shocked everyone. They thought she was just a secretary, an ordinary woman tucked behind a desk in the West Wing, quietly typing memos and managing schedules. To the high-powered political elite swirling through the marble halls of the White House, Karoline was invisible. That's why, at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, when a group of smug junior aides jokingly suggested she take the stage during the open mic portion of the night, nobody expected anything but awkward silence and a few forced laughs. Instead, what followed was a performance so haunting, so soul-deep and stunning, that it brought the room of politicians, press, and power brokers to their feet in stunned applause. From that moment on, nothing about Karoline or how the world saw her would ever be the same. Karoline Leavitt arrived at the White House before the sun did. Her heels clicked softly down the polished hallway as she passed portraits of presidents whose names she had once memorized for history exams. Now, she walked beneath their gazes every morning like it was routine, like she belonged here. But truth be told, no one really noticed her. To most people in the West Wing, she was that secretary, the one who never caused trouble, never raised her voice, never got invited to after-hours drinks or high-stakes meetings. She was efficient, quiet, forgettable, and Karoline was okay with that. Or at least, she had convinced herself to be. She knew how to disappear in plain sight. A crisp blouse, hair in a bun, eyes down, always early, never late. She typed fast, made perfect coffee, and never got anyone's name wrong. Her desk sat outside Deputy Chief of Staff Langley's office, and if she was lucky, she'd get a nod from him on Fridays. But today, something was different. She sensed it in the air, subtle and sharp, like the charge before a summer storm. People moved faster, voices tighter, eyes scanning everyone with just a little more suspicion than usual. It was the kind of day when reputations could shift with a single sentence, when a slip of the tongue could end a career. Karoline kept her head down and kept typing. At 10:47 a.m., Langley barked out of his office. "Karoline, what's this about you playing the piano at the correspondence dinner?" She froze. "Excuse me?" she asked carefully, glancing up. He waved a hand like it was nothing. "Apparently someone signed you up for the open mic. Some intern said it'd be hilarious." There was laughter from another office. One of the younger aides, no doubt. Karoline felt the blood rise in her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. She didn't give them that satisfaction. "I didn't sign up," she said calmly. Langley shrugged. "Well, your name's on the list. Unless you want to make a scene, might be easier to just play something and get it over with." Karoline nodded slowly. Understood. She turned back to her keyboard, but her mind wasn't on the press release she was editing. It was a swirl of old memories, dusty piano keys, Sunday afternoons in a quiet New Hampshire church, her mother humming in the kitchen. They wanted to laugh at her. Let them try. The West Wing had its own kind of high school hierarchy, just with sharper suits and sharper tongues. The policy interns were the new kids, eager and wide-eyed, clinging to every word from their higher-ups. The comms team were the gossip kings and queens, always in the loop, always one tweet away from setting something on fire. The senior staff were the cool kids, untouchable, polished, busy pretending they didn't hear the whispers trailing behind them. And then there was Karoline. She wasn't part of any clique. She moved like a shadow between offices, a ghost in heels. But people still talked, especially now. She's really gonna do it? Is it, like, ironic? She must suck, right? Maybe she'll play chopsticks and call it a night. The voices weren't quiet. They didn't have to be. No one expected Karoline Leavitt to push back. She heard it all while waiting in line at the security checkpoint, while pouring stale coffee in the staff kitchen, while organizing the seating chart for the correspondence dinner. A few interns even snickered when she walked past them in the hallway, like this whole thing was some hilarious inside joke. She didn't let it show, but it stung. Back at her desk, she opened a spreadsheet and stared through it. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen. Somewhere deep in her chest, a piano melody stirred, slow and sad, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. That night, after her shift ended, she didn't go home. Instead, she took a detour. It was almost midnight when she slipped into the empty East Room, its chandeliers casting golden shadows across the floor. At the far end of the hall sat a grand piano, Steinway, black, immaculate. Presidents had heard music here. Dignitaries. World leaders. Karoline sat down in silence, her hand trembling as it hovered above the keys. The last time she'd played in public, she had been 17. That recital ended with a hospital phone call, and after that, the music stopped.
But now?
Now she had something to prove. Her fingers touched the keys. A single note, then another.
Soft.
Hesitant. And then, like a storm breaking open, she played. Not for the interns. Not for Langley. Not even for the president. She played for herself. The music stayed with her long after she left the East Room. Walking back to her apartment in the quiet fog of DC's midnight streets, Karoline felt like she was carrying something fragile in her chest, like a song still unfinished. Her hands, tucked into her coat pockets, still tingled from the keys. She hadn't touched a piano in years, but somehow it had all come rushing back, like her fingers had never forgotten. But they had forgotten why she stopped. She barely slept that night. At 2:03 a.m., Karoline sat on the edge of her bed, staring at a worn photograph on her nightstand. Two girls on a church stage, one at a microphone, the other behind a piano. She was the one at the keys. Her sister, Ellie, the one with the voice. They were unstoppable together. Until they weren't. Back then, music had been everything: Sundays at church, local talent shows, open mic nights at dusty cafes. Their parents didn't have much, but they believed in their daughter's dreams. Ellie was the star, radiant and loud and magnetic. Karoline was the quiet one, the arranger, the accompanist, the steady heartbeat behind the melody. Then came the crash. A car. A drunk driver. One snowy evening that shattered everything. Karoline survived. Ellie didn't. And after that, silence. She couldn't bear to touch a piano. Not when her playing had always been part of them. Now, years later, she was expected to perform again, this time not for love or passion, but as a joke. A political party trick. A laugh at the expense of the secretary who was too plain, too quiet, too invisible. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know the fire buried beneath the stillness. Karoline stood, walked to the corner of her small apartment, and opened a dusty case tucked beneath a pile of boxes. Inside was her old sheet music, wrinkled, faded, but still alive. She flipped through it like a photo album, pausing at one piece in particular. A song Ellie used to sing. Her fingers brushed the notes. Tomorrow night she would play. Not because they forced her, because she chose to. The White House Correspondents' Dinner was Washington's version of prom, only with fewer teenagers and more power. The ballroom of the Washington Hilton gleamed with soft golden lights, crystal chandeliers, and a sea of dark suits and glittering gowns. Senators, journalists, celebrities, and staffers all mingled with practiced smiles and cocktail laughter. Karoline Leavitt stood near the back of the room, wearing a simple black dress and a name badge that screamed support staff. She looked nothing like the bold, talented woman who had poured her soul into a piano less than 24 hours ago. She didn't want to be noticed. But tonight, that choice wasn't hers. Langley caught her eye across the room and gave a sarcastic thumbs up. "You're up in 20, he mouthed, then turned back to schmooze a senator. Karoline's heart hammered.
Her palms were damp.
She could have backed out. She could have claimed illness, faked a last-minute emergency. No one would have blamed her. But she'd made a promise, to herself and to the girl in that photo. A junior aide with a clipboard appeared beside her. "Miss Leavitt, you're next after the speech. Just, have fun with it." He smiled like it was all a game. She nodded. Then the lights dimmed, and the crowd quieted as the president took the podium and delivered the annual roast, a clever mix of policy jokes and celebrity barbs. Laughter echoed through the hall like wind through marble columns. When he stepped down to thunderous applause, the MC returned to the stage. "And now," he said with a grin, "for a very special surprise performance. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt from the West Wing." There was polite clapping. A few smirks. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Wait, her." Karoline walked to the stage, heels steady, spine straight. Her pulse raced, but her face was calm. She sat at the grand piano, its surface gleaming under the stage lights. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't need to. She placed her fingers on the keys, closed her eyes, and began to play. It started soft. A gentle melody, like a lullaby born from the hush of snowfall. Then it grew layered, stormy, passionate. Her hands danced across the keys with power and grace, telling a story deeper than any speech or soundbite could hold. It wasn't just music. It was grief. It was survival. It was love. By the time the final note faded, the room was breathless. No laughter. No whispers. Just silence. And then, an eruption of applause. People stood. They looked stunned.
Awed. Moved.
Some clapped slowly, others wildly. Even Langley, jaw slack, offered a quiet nod. Karoline stood, gave a small bow, and left the stage without a word. She didn't need to say anything. The music had said it all. The next morning, Karoline walked into the White House like she did every day, badge clipped to her blazer, coffee in hand, eyes forward. But something was different. People were staring. Not the usual glances she'd grown used to, those dismissive, forgettable looks reserved for staff in the background. No, this was different. These looks lingered. Curious, cautious, respectful. The silence that had once surrounded her like armor was gone, replaced by whispers. That's her. The one who played. Did you see it live? I caught it on the live stream. Gave me chills. She's not just a secretary anymore. Karoline kept her pace steady, but her heart beat a little faster. When she reached her desk, a small envelope rested on her keyboard. No name on the outside. She opened it slowly.
Inside.
You reminded me what art can do. Thank you. POTUS. Her hands trembled slightly, but her lips curled into the faintest smile. The president. The president had watched her, had listened, had felt it. By noon, her inbox was flooded. A request for an interview from the Washington Post. An invitation to perform at a cultural diplomacy event. A message from the Chief of Staff's office. The First Lady would like to speak with you, schedule permitting. And then came the other kind of attention. Langley stepped out of his office around 1 p.m., coffee in hand, face unreadable. You've caused quite a stir, he said dryly. Karoline looked up from her screen. I just played a song. He smirked. That's the thing about this place, Leavitt. You play one right note, and suddenly people forget your title. He leaned in slightly. Don't let it go to your head. Karoline nodded politely, but inside, something had shifted. Because for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She spent the rest of the afternoon answering polite emails, dodging curious stares, and trying to breathe through the dizzying new air she was now walking in. But when the sun set and the building quieted, she stayed behind at her desk, hands folded, eyes closed. She wasn't sure what came next. All she knew was that she wasn't invisible anymore, and that kind of light couldn't be undone. By the end of the week, Karoline's name was everywhere. Clips of her performance had gone viral. Headlines called her the silent star of the White House, secretary with soul, and the melody that shook Washington. Late-night hosts praised her. Morning shows played her clip on loop. For the first time in her life, Karoline Leavitt was not background noise. She was the headline. But fame, especially in Washington, came with a price. Some people cheered. Others whispered. A few sharpened their knives. She started noticing it in the little things. A senior advisor who used to smile now avoided eye contact. A meeting invite that should have gone to her mysteriously didn't. Her once-ignored presence now made people nervous, and that was dangerous in a place built on power games. One afternoon, Karoline walked past a closed conference room and heard her name.
She's just a secretary.
What's next? A talent show in the Situation Room? I don't care how well she plays. She's not one of us. She's becoming a distraction. Karoline paused. Not with fear. With clarity. She realized something in that moment. They weren't afraid of her music. They were afraid of what it revealed. That there was brilliance outside their circle. That someone without pedigree, without position, could still command a room without saying a single word. That scared them more than any scandal. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Karoline sat at her upright piano by the window. The city lights shimmered through the glass, casting quiet shadows across the keys. She began to play again. Not for a crowd, not for headlines, but for herself. A softer melody this time. Reflective. Still. When the final note faded, she closed the lid gently and whispered into the silence. You see me now. And for the first time in years, she believed it. The story the world thought was over was just beginning.